What is up, and welcome back to the Modern Mastery Podcast, where we help you master the modern world through mental, physical, spiritual, and business growth. Today, I have Tim Denning, who is an Aussie blogger with 500 million plus content views that writes about self-help, personal finance, and gives his writing tips. On this episode, we talk about how Tim quit his cushy job for the entrepreneurial life of uncertainty, Tim's writing process that is responsible for 10 articles a week and 5,000 total throughout his career, and how Tim turned mental illness into 500 million content views. If you are a growth-minded individual that has skills, interests, or passions, have tried to turn them into a source of income but struggle to make it sustainable and predictable, consider joining Modern Mastery HQ, where you can copy and paste our hundreds of processes, strategies, and systems into your one-person business while working 4 hours or less per day. We've packaged up the information from myself, a marketing consultant, and Joey, a performance consultant, into proven processes for starting and growing your business as a coach, freelancer, digital product creator, content creator, or online educator while becoming a laser-focused machine. We offer a seemingly outrageous $50,000 guarantee because we are that confident in our teachings. If you want to build a one-person business, design your perfect lifestyle, and live like you are supposed to, go to join.modernmastery.co/podcast to get your first month for $5. Or if you want to skip all of the do-it-yourself stuff and join an intensive 6-month program that guarantees business and personal success, we also have the Mastery Program. You can apply for the next cohort at join.modernmastery.co/program. Links to both of those will be in the show notes. And last but not least, I have a few favors to ask that cost a whopping $0. So if you enjoyed this podcast, subscribe or follow. It's one button click away, and it helps support the growth of this podcast. 2, leave a rating letting us know what you thought. 3, you can tag us at Modern Mastery on Twitter or at Modern Mastery HQ on Instagram with a link to this episode and some kind words, or just some kind words. It always helps. And if you do all 3, send us a DM and we have something special for you in return. So without further ado, let's dive right into this episode of the Modern Mastery Podcast. But yeah, man. So Tim, welcome to the show, dude. How are you doing today?
Good, man. Thanks for having me, Dan. Been following your work for ages. We're on a similar kind of vibe. So about time we jump on a call and talk through some stuff.
Yeah. I didn't. It was so weird because I didn't know that you had followed me when I was previously a big Medium reader. Like I would read through articles on Medium, and that was like what I would do in the morning to kind of get my brain working. And so it was really cool when I saw you just comment on one of my tweets, and I'm like, no way. Like Tim is on Twitter and he's starting on Twitter, or he's been on Twitter for a bit. And so I like hit you with a follow. We DM'd, got on this podcast, and now we're here. So it's really cool to see that because you never really know who's watching, right? And like we both think highly of each other, but even then it's weird to think that we both think highly of each other just through each other's content. Like we're both readers. I don't know if you feel the same way about that, but it's like it's always the weirdest thing when I've been following someone for so long and then they're like, "Oh, I've been following you and I love your stuff." I'm like, "No way." Like I thought I was just a normal reader of yours until like we met. It's a super cool thing.
Yeah, kind of. It's happened a few times to me. So I found out that like James Altucher had been reading my stuff, and I'm a huge fan of him. And then I
Really?
checked my Twitter and realized he was following me, and I was like, okay, that's cool. And then I heard through someone that like Ryan Holiday had been reading some stuff. I was like, that's cool. Um, so
Yeah.
it's back to what you say. You just do your thing, right? And then people are watching, but they often don't make it known that they're watching. And
Hmm.
that's just the power of like effort and actually putting the work in. Kind of speaks for
Yeah.
itself, right?
Yeah. I just recently I've heard of James Altucher before. I knew he was big with some like publishing, like Agora or something. Don't know exactly, but his podcast is one that I recently picked up, started listening to on runs, and I really like his vibe. I like his interview style. It's very laid back. But in terms of writing in Medium, how did you get into that entire world? Because it's so foreign to me. Like Twitter's my thing, but starting on Medium, or tell me the story of how the online writing thing began.
Okay, it's a bit of a long story, so hopefully you're kind of ready.
Yeah, that's
Um,
what we're here for.
so how did it start? Look, my kind of origin story, most people know there's a pretty severe battle with mental illness. Like a number of years ago, I was dealing with it for many, many years, but in silence, and I didn't actually know that that's what the problem was. I just know that I woke up every day and like something just wasn't right. It's almost like your brain is working against you. Or another way to put it would be, imagine waking up and walking into your kitchen and you can't trust that gravity is going to keep you on the ground. Like your mind is that messed up that you're like,
Damn.
you're just worried to walk, right? So it's pretty severe. And, these things happen from like childhood often. Like if I look back, there was probably a few things that kind of caused it. And because they were never dealt with, it ends up leading to basically you don't trust your own mind to do what it needs to do. And so that's what it kind of started from. And, some people know if they've read my stuff that I was involved in like a number of businesses with my brother. And so in 2011, I decided to kind of walk away from all that. And that was a big deal because, we had over 100 employees, so it wasn't something small. And I just wanted to do something different. And the way to describe it for people is it kind of felt like the end. Like imagine that your whole life is mapped out for you. You're already a millionaire. You know you're going to be worth a lot of money, so that part's done. You're basically ready to buy a house and pay cash. So everything's mapped out. And at that time, I was 26, right? So basically done. Whereas most people were just getting started in their career. They're figuring out what they're going to do. That part for me was solved. So when you walk away from it, that's a big deal. So like I had a really fancy BMW. Obviously, I had to sell that. All the nice things that I got accustomed to that the business paid for, all gone. Disconnect a lot. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to have to go get a job now, right? After all that sort of happened. And not an easy thing to do because the fear back then was, well, you're an entrepreneur. You've never had a real job according to your resume. So who's going to hire you? And it turns out that fear was real. Like it's actually very difficult. So the only way to combat that is I had to take a minimum wage job. So I went for the lowest thing that I could find, which was a job in a call center. They were the only ones that would hire me because they would literally take anybody. And so, I went from like where people saw I was all the way back down to kind of nothing. And that was kind of handy because it was the first couple of months were hard because I had to get back into like having a job and having a boss. And because it was a call center, we were basically like glued to our phone. So you couldn't leave the phone. Like there was a tracker on it. And if you were away for more than like 30 seconds, like alarm bells would ring and it was like a prison sentence. And so, but it was a good thing because obviously I was also dealing with this at that time kind of unknown mental illness. So it gave me a chance to sort of get home early and work through what that would be. So that kind of ties in because at the same time, I'm sort of going through this period of like, all right, I need to reinvent myself. I need to kind of do something, but I'm super scared. I don't really know what to do. And so, back then, like social media, I was on Facebook and I had a couple of friends that I'd gone to high school with. And they were both like pretty good looking dudes. They were always getting like heaps of chicks. And, they were on Facebook and they were posting like a lot of stuff. And they seemed to be making like a lot of money, but they were very, very young. And I thought, this is interesting. So I was just following their things. And I noticed that they were posting a lot to a particular blog. It was like a self-improvement / motivation blog. And so naturally I'm just clicking the links. I start to read it. I'm like, wow, this is really cool. Like, this is not like anything I've heard before. Like society just keeps telling me that it's over and like you're stupid and entrepreneurs, once they fail, they're finished. Like that was a story I was hearing. And then I was hearing this other story and I started to see like Tony Robbins and these kind of people popping up in the feed. And then at the same time, like I went and caught up with these two guys that I went to high school to like, I don't know, just reconnect. Because at that point I ditched all my old friends. They were all like huge into alcohol and taking drugs on the weekend and stuff, and I just realized that like I was never going to get anywhere kind of following that path. Not that I was doing that personally, but I was just around people doing that. And so so I went and caught up with them, and what were they doing? They were doing network marketing. And I'd known from ages ago that like network marketing, you either love it or you hate it. I was probably in the don't really love it. Selling to friends is not my idea of fun. But my friend, like I was telling him how I had really low energy. I felt like crap every day. Again, this is all part of the mental illness, but I didn't know. And he gave me like a 30-day supply of, like, they were selling nutritional stuff. So it was like protein powders and like vitamins and stuff like that. So I basically took that. I tried it for 30 days. It didn't really do anything. So I was like, well, if it doesn't work for me, I'm not going to sell this. So I decided not to. But just to put this in perspective, these guys, like, one of them was Dave, right? He was driving around in a brand new like red Ferrari, right? So they were doing pretty well for themselves, right? So I kept following their stuff, and so that blog that I mentioned before, I started reading that, and then I can't quite remember because this is going back like 10 years, 8 years, something like that. But I remember that I was studying like what was happening on the blog, and I wanted to know who owned it. And it turned out that as I was kind of like going down the Google rabbit hole, a guy in Australia owned it, which is where I live. So I was like, wow, that's interesting. And I noticed that he was running like live events, like self-improvement stuff. So I looked on the bottom of one of his landing pages, and I noticed there was a phone number, and it was like a local phone number. So I don't know why, I just decided to call it, and he didn't pick up, so I was super disappointed. But this like lady picked up, who was quite young, and I just started talking to her, and then I learned by the end of the call that was actually his girlfriend, and like she does all the organizing. And somehow I managed to like get a few minutes with him, and on that call I said like, if I'm ever over your way, like we should do coffee. And he's like, yeah, that'd be cool. And so he lived on the other side of Australia, which is like a 4-hour plane ride. And so over where he lives, it's like a small town. And if you picture this, like people like him wouldn't be doing a lot of face-to-face coffees. It's not like living in New York where people do coffee meetings all day long. Over there, like a coffee meeting is pretty rare. So I thought, okay, well, he said that if I'm ever over there, we could catch up. So I did something a little bit crazy, and I just jumped on a plane, went over there. Now, that may not sound like a big deal, but remember that I had like very severe mental illness, and flying was like my second biggest fear. And up until that point, I hadn't really flown anywhere. I'd never left Australia, right? So a 4-hour plane ride was a big deal. So I went over there, and I had no meeting booked. I didn't even know if he'd be there. And I got there on day one, and I was only there, I think, for 2 days, right? And I'm ringing the phone number that he gave me because he said, call me on this number, like when you get there. So I get there and he's not picking up. And it's like day 2, and I'm like, shit, I got to go home soon. Like and it cost me a lot of money. Like, keep in mind, I'm working on minimum wage, right? Flying 4 hours is a long way. I had to stay in like a decent hotel because that's all that was available. And so anyway, long story short, like towards like time's running out, but he eventually does pick up the phone. And he's like, yeah, let's meet up at like 6 o'clock at this like cafe. So we catch up, and I had no real agenda, right? I just wanted to meet this guy because I was inspired by his work. And as we're chatting, at the time I was working in a bank, right? And I noticed that like the number one thing that he wanted was he had a podcast and he wanted guests. And I was working in a bank, and a lot of my customers were like tech companies like Canva, 99 Designs, these types of ones, right? But I wasn't managing them directly. I was like one step removed. But I could get to these people if I really wanted to. So I said to him, hey, like, one of them I remember was, what's that website called? Not Theme Forest? Envato. One of them was Envato. And I had them as a customer. And at the time, I was still like a small kind of Aussie startup. And I said, hey, I could get the founder of Envato on your podcast, if that's helpful to you, like just to say thank you for having the coffee. And he's like, yeah, that'd be really cool. And then so later on, I emailed him. He's like, actually, I don't have time to do all these podcasts. He's like, why don't you do the podcast? And then you can turn it into articles. Now, I was a bit disappointed because I was hoping he was going to say, why don't you do the podcast and we'll put it on the website? And, this website was like pretty popular. But he's like, nah. Mm-hmm. So he goes, turn it into articles. And he gave me this software called Ecamm. And I used Skype, and I would just record the calls with these people that were basically customers of where I was working in this bank. And then I would turn them into articles. And it was a pretty long process. It was pretty boring. The end result was really crap. They read like startup press releases. It was basically like, this company started in Australia. They sell X product. And then the takeaway was always, oh, and they raised $10 million. Like that was supposed to kind of wow you and make you excited that you read the article. So I was doing that. I was pretty bored. But as part of this, he recorded some videos of like how to write on WordPress, how to publish them, how to do all the images. So I was learning that, and then he gave me like admin access so I could actually log in without anybody kind of checking anything and publish whatever I want. And so one time, this is at the same time when I was kind of battling the mental illness stuff, I wrote an article about like ways that I'd kind of changed my life and pivoted away from all that. And we put that up. It was one of the early articles, and it just completely blew up. Like on Facebook alone, I had 84,000 shares. So not likes, not comments, like actual shares. This thing just went like mega viral. And then I was like, okay, so maybe I should stop writing startup press releases and like pivot towards this stuff. So I kept writing on his website, and then eventually like I discovered Medium through a Google search. And then I was like, oh, maybe I could repost what I was doing on his website on Medium. So initially I was just copying and pasting, and then years kind of went on, and then I figured out actually if you just like write on there from scratch as like a second place to write, that would be cool. So I know that's a super long story. Hopefully I didn't drain you, but that's how I ended up on Medium.
No, that is a crazy story. And I mean, even just hopping on the plane, that's something that I have touched on a few times, but did that risk alone like solidify some lesson in your head on risk taking?
Yeah, I think it did. I think it's like you just never know what can happen. And a lot of people, they sit at home and they overthink and they procrastinate and they have whatever the dream is, but they never actually do any execution on it. So I'm really big now on like experiments. Like I don't know where things are going to lead, but I'm just constantly conducting like daily experiments. And that's how Twitter started. So obviously I've been on Twitter since 2009, but I've admitted this, so I'm not saying anything out of the blue, but I basically was young and dumb, and I went and bought followers. So I think I bought about 15,000 of these like shitty bot followers. And once you do that, you basically destroy your Twitter account. I know that now. And so about 3-4 months ago, I decided to nuke my old Twitter account, which had about 5,000 real followers and about 15,000 shit ones. And then started again. And that was just an experiment to see like, hey, this would be cool. And I've always loved Twitter. And now that's led into like, it's something I'm going to like go really deep on and spend a lot of time on because it feeds nicely into Medium and Substack and some of the other platforms. So yeah, back to your question. I think if you don't take risks and you don't back yourself, like you're never going to know. That's the thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, like if you didn't hop on that plane, and especially, dude, I mean, even battling mental illness at the time, like that's the surprising part to me. I can't really imagine what you were feeling at the time, but just doing that alone is crazy. And I talk about this a good amount. I've written on it quite a few times about like diving into the unknown, because you just don't know what's out there until you kind of peek your head in there and you see what's in there, or you just throw yourself completely overboard, and then you gain awareness of what's in there and you understand that the unknown is the land of opportunity. But you don't know that until, like, nobody knows that until they just fucking do it, right? And that kind of sparks a question in my head, because I see this all the time, right? It's like, oh, just go and do it, right? Procrastination is a huge issue. It's always like, how do I do this? How do I get started? I just can't do it. And the common answer, especially on somewhere on Twitter, where someone has it figured out, they have momentum built or something, they're just like, just go do it. Like, you have to do it. Do you have that same line of thought, or do you have a different piece of advice that you give people?
Mine's a little bit different. I look at it as like, start with habits, then use effort, and then add consistency. So that's like my kind of 3-step formula. And so the habit is really just an experiment. So again, if someone wants to grow on Twitter as an example, then I would say, well, cool, start by writing, and you've got to make it so small that like you can't stuff it up, right? So start with like 1 tweet per week. If you can't do that, I don't know, there's something wrong with it. So 1 tweet a week, anybody can do that. It's so small, right? And that's what I started. Like 1 article a week was all I was doing, right? And then once you're doing that for, say, I forgot what James Clear's rule is. I think it's 28 days. Do it for 28 days. And then go, all right, now let's do 1 tweet per day, right? Anybody can do that. Start doing that. Now let's reply to 1 tweet per day. And you basically just keep stacking on top of that habit. And then and this is what I did with mental illness, right? Which is one of the tips, is you've got to have evidence against yourself. So your brain is like from caveman time, right? And it keeps telling you to stop. It's uncomfortable. It hurts. Don't do it. And the only thing you can do to beat that is you can produce evidence. So my mental illness was telling me all these lies. Like, you can't go out to a restaurant, you can't get in a lift, you can't go on a plane. So the only way to defeat that is to go and do things that show that you can do it. And then what I would do is I would write it down. And then when I was in a moment where I felt petrified, I would look back at all the things that I said I couldn't do and then see the evidence that said, but you did it. And then it's like, well, sorry, I don't believe you. So once you kind of add that in, I mean, that's how you get the results. But the problem is, people know that habits work, but they don't understand that, like, you don't magically figure out what the habits are for you. No one knows. Like, I was writing startup press releases. That was the wrong habit, but it led me to the right habit. So that's the difficult part.
I love that. I'm of the same mind, because it's so difficult. This is aside from the habits. I love your way of doing that. I'm very pro make it so stupidly simple that it would be stupid if you didn't do it, right? But in terms of like finding your way and which habits to form and which direction to take, it's mostly you just aim in a positive direction, like a generally positive direction that interests you, or at least has some potential for opportunity, something productive. And then that leads you to the right path, right? Because with me, I tried so many different things before I landed on Twitter. And even now, I'm still doing so many different things. And Twitter is just my main platform. That's where a lot of people know me from. So that's where I refer to the most. But before online writing, did you try a bunch of different skills or business models to end up on that path?
Yeah, I did try a lot of things, and the biggest mistake I made was that I didn't get around other people that were trying to do what I was trying to do. So for about 5 years, I was just like a lone writer. I had no other writer friends other than the guy that helped me initially, but he was like super busy, so he didn't give me that much stuff. And if I was doing it again, I would have got in like a group chat. But even back then, though, things like Telegram and that weren't really a thing, so it was a lot harder. So that's one way to figure it out. Yeah, it's really challenging. Like, you do just figure it out as you go, but you've got to try enough things and then have enough self-awareness to work out like what it is that you do and don't like. So a lot of people, they'll do things but they hate it, and it's like, well, if you hate it, you're not going to be able to turn it into a habit. So you've got to have that self-awareness. Yeah, man. I'm struggling to think of anything else.
Can you train that self-awareness? Like, how does that start?
A lot of people use journaling for self-awareness. I don't love journaling. It feels a bit weird to me. But I kind of do it. So I like to say that it's very soppy and it's like all the yogis do journaling. But I sort of do it, but just in a different way. I'll send emails to myself with different thoughts or things that I'm thinking about. So like, for example, this year I suffered a pretty big like kind of loss. And it was a bit kind of devastating at the start. And what I did is I use Rome Research is my like note-taking app. It's pretty sophisticated. It's sort of like notes, but on steroids. And so in there, I wrote down like, and I don't know why I did this, but I just wrote down like everything that's happened in my life, right? And every day I keep adding to it, and it's sorted by years, because I realized that like there's a lot of things I've just forgotten. And so I want to keep going back and doing that. So I added like that loss for 2021. And then I don't know why, I just accidentally, I started going in each day after the loss and writing in like one positive thing about that loss. And now I've been doing that for like so many days. I've got this whole list of stuff that's like an argument against the loss. So the loss should equal like huge failure, end of the world. But then I've got all these dot points about why it's really good. And so that's really journaling if you break it down, but it's just a different form of journaling. And it's obviously all in bullet points, and Rome Research, has a pretty unique way in terms of how it takes notes and how you find stuff again and how you consume the content. So that's what builds the self-awareness. When you're writing this stuff enough times, when it's in your head, it's very easy to become a lie. But when you write it on the screen, and especially if you have the intent of putting it on Twitter or something, you can't lie. Like, that's a disservice to the people that are going to see it. So it's like the Jim Carrey, liar, liar scene, right? Like, you just can't lie. There is no way. But you can bullshit to yourself all the time in your head about all the things you can't do, why you can't do it. Excuses are easy. And so for me, like, writing online, again, has almost been a form of journaling, except I've got accountability, and I'm not doing it just for me. I'm doing it because I'm hoping that other people will learn from these things. So it's sort of like a data-backed, crowd-funded form of journaling in a way.
That's a great way of putting it, man. I have experienced the exact same thing because I don't journal much. I brain dump journal, which is what my business partner Joey, he is very big on. So at night I just sit with my little notebook and write whatever comes to mind, plan my day, think about the tasks I have to do, just get everything out of my head, which I think really helps with just clearing the mind, possibly some training of self-awareness there. But I guess the real journaling that I do now is at any time of the day when a thought pops into my head, I put it into my notes app, and then I'll come back to it and I'll either have it for a long form piece of content, for a tweet, for part of my book. But that's also what you said has also made me realize that when a negative thought comes to my head, Twitter alone has kind of trained me to turn it into a lesson, to turn like that negative thought into a lesson that I can pass on to someone else, because I've experienced it before and it helps me think through it. It's like if negative thought pops into my head, it barely has that time to have any effect just because my mind immediately tries to turn it into content that I can put out and like spread some form of positivity with that. So that's a huge benefit alone of writing online. But I want to step back a bit because in one of your tweets, on the new account, one of your most popular tweets, it talked about what you did to overcome your mental illness, and making a fear list was one of those. Is that what you mentioned earlier on, or could you just like explain the process of the fear list for me?
Yeah, so initially it was like, all right, I've got this mental illness thing. Like, what's driving it? It's fear. Okay, so what are the fears? So I wrote down all the fears. And like I said, it was like getting into a lift, going on a plane, this type of stuff, right? And so I had that list. And then after I had it, I was like, well, the only way we're going to defeat this is if we go and conquer these one by one. So as I started doing that, I changed the headline of the list from fear list to, I think it was success list. No, massive successes was the title. And so I would have that on my notes app, and every time I was doing a job interview or anything that like would make me scared, I would look at that list and go, basically, here's the evidence that says that you're going to smash it out of the park. Now, a lot of this came from, on that particular tweet you're referring to, a lot of it came from the idea of neuroplasticity, and I won't get too complicated as to what that is. Most people have come across the idea, but I got this off Tony Robbins. So one of the things I did do was in 2013, and I can't remember exactly how I got to Tony. I think it was through the blog that I was writing on. But he comes to Australia multiple times a year. It's one of the few places in the world that he travels to consistently, even during the pandemic. And he teaches all this stuff like in a 4-day seminar. And when I went to the seminar on day one, just to put it in perspective, I felt like a huge idiot because, first of all, the tickets cost like $1,000, which for me at the time was a lot of money because, a rock concert's $200. This is 5 times the price of a rock concert. I get in, I walk into the lobby, and the first person I see is a guy from my high school who was basically like the best looking dude in the entire high school. Everyone wanted him. He's there. And like, I know him. We weren't really friends, but like he was 5 levels up to where I was. He walks up, he recognizes me, and he has this look on his face like, what are you doing at a lame ass Tony Robbins event? And, I can't say, oh, I'm here to like defeat mental illness. That would sound lame. So I sort of like bullshitted a little bit. And then I'm like, what are you doing here? He's like, oh, my mum loves Tony Robbins, so I'm just here because she wants me to be here. So here's me there. Seriously, he's just there because he thinks it's a lame event. And he's like, why didn't you come and sit with us? And I was like, oh man.
Oh.
So I said, I got to go to the bathroom. And then I went to the other side because I'm like, there's no way I can do this event and take it seriously with this guy here. Like, talk about bad luck. Like, out of all the people, I've got to find him here, right? A huge distraction. So I went into the room and there's like thousands of people. And basically, like, you run to the seat and whoever runs, like, gets the ones closest to, like, the front, right? And so I run to the seat. They start the event. And there's basically these people come on stage and they start like jumping up and down and doing like all this aerobics and weird stuff. And I'm just like, man, I don't do dancing. I don't jump up and down. What have I done? I'm ready to leave at this point. And then, I don't know, I ended up staying, and you eventually learn that all these silly things that he's making you do is for a reason. He's not trying to make you look like an idiot. He's not trying to make you dance funny. It's because he's trying to teach you about energy and like how to get into high energy. And so through that process, he does like a lot of lessons over the 4 days, but one of them is fear. And so part of that fear list idea kind of came from Tony. And then he teaches like neuroplasticity, which is essentially that your brain is like a bunch of wires, and those wires can be rewired at any point, and you can basically do the programming yourself. And so the fear list was a way of kind of reprogramming the brain and sort of interrupting all those patterns that tell me that I can't do this and I can't do that. And so that led to the fear list. And then obviously anyone that has mental illness, like one thing I did do is I saw a psychologist, and I took that list with me. And by the time I got to all the end of the session, it's like this weird thing. If you go in every day and you like share all this stuff, the dude says nothing. And it costs like, I don't know, $150 an hour or something. They say nothing. And you get to like the 10th session. So this is $1,500 in. Right, remember, I'm on minimum wage, right? So this is a lot of money to me. And I get to the 10th session. I'm like, all right, doc, like, now what? Like, give me something. Tell me something, man, for the $1,500. And, they have like all these long gazes and they look around and try and look all smart. And then he basically just says to me, look, you come across as a really smart guy. You're probably the smartest guy that's come in and had one of these sessions. He's like, there's actually nothing I can do for you because you've figured out the entire puzzle all by yourself. So he's like, all I need you to do is I need you to go take your fear list and that exercise that you've come up with on your own, and I want you just to go and execute it. And that's it. And if you do that, all the things that you'll learn in the process will fix all the problems that we've talked about. You won't need to come and see me ever again. And that was it. That was the last time I saw him. And I did exactly what he said, and it worked. But mind you, I came up with the idea, not him. So it's kind of, I did waste my money in a way. But you don't know in these things. No, like, I'm not an expert in the brain, so I don't know.
Mm. Yeah, I like that a lot because I talk about this a good amount. You talked about journaling being a vessel for that self-awareness, and this is just a touch on self-awareness again because I truly believe it's an invaluable skill throughout life. It's one of the most important, in my opinion, and I really feel like speaking to someone you can confide in, whether you're paying them or not, or you're just speaking kind of physically to a piece of paper with your pen, is a great way to gain that awareness, because if you're aware of it and you question it and even can practice like metacognition, letting questions trigger questions onto why this is happening, what is happening, how it's happening, and understanding the irrationality behind it can be very, very transformative. But you also mentioned in that tweet that you walked on fire. What what was that, and like what did you learn from that?
Yeah, so at Tony Robbins events, like one of the things that he makes you do, which is pretty well known, is you have to walk on fire as part of the event. Now, I had no intention of doing this because as a kid I got burned quite badly, and it left like a pretty traumatic experience where I just never wanted to get burnt again. So the idea of walking on fire is the worst thing in the world. So when I went to the event, my plan was to just, when they get to that segment, you're not in a prison, right? You can leave, you can go to the bathroom. I was like, I'll just go to the bathroom when everyone's doing it. I'll come back when it's done, high five everyone, pretend that I did it too. No one's going to notice, right? There's like 10,000 people there. No one's going to know. But what I didn't know is that Tony's smarter than I expected. And he did about 2 hours of what he calls priming. And he just drops this. So the walk on fire is at about 9 o'clock. And from about 6, 7 o'clock, he starts all this crazy stuff. And it's a weird experience because there's like chanting and it's very tribal. It's like you almost feel like you've gone back 1,000 years. He does all these things to prime you, and you've got to do this thing like make your move. It's like a power move, all this kind of stuff. And again, back then I was very naive. I didn't know what this stuff was doing, but it was wiring my brain for like what was about to happen. And by the end of that experience, you are so hyped up. You're on like feel like you're in another dimension. There's so much going on. There's just no way that you're not walking on fire, right? And so the walking on fire is designed to be a metaphor, which is essentially you go to the event, you start in one position and you come out the other end transformed. Now, it sounds like a huge promise. It sounds like it's bullshit, but it actually does work. And so you go out into the like open car park, and there's all these like mats that have like burning hot coals that are like got, I don't know, a little bit of fire coming out of them. It's not like a huge bonfire or anything, but it's just there's like fire on it, and it's super super hot. You basically take off your shoes and your socks, you roll up your pants, and then you walk along this thing. And so everyone does it. You do it like sort of one after another. And when you get to the end of it, like freaking, like it's your feet are all burned. Now the part that's gonna really blow your mind is a couple of things. So when you look at the bottom of your feet, mine were very badly burned. Part of the reason was that the coals get cooler the longer they're out there. And this happens in the middle of winter. And I was unlucky that when I went to do mine, they put down a fresh bunch of coals. So the temperature that I was walking on was probably the hottest that it could possibly be. So I look at my feet and they're burning red hot. Now, I've had this experience before. I know what it's like to be burned. And I felt zero pain. So visually it looks terrible, but physically I can't feel anything. So I'm like, okay, that's cool. So I wake up the next day, I look at my feet, they're still burned, like it's really visibly quite bad. No pain. And I'm like, this is weird. Now at the same time, you got to understand over these 4 days that like, another thing that I was doing is a bit bizarre, is I didn't eat. So the event starts at like 8 a.m. and it goes till 12 p.m., 1 a.m. every single night. And other than eat in the morning, I basically had no food for the entire day. And normally I would be starving, stomach would be rumbling. Again, that physical thing had disappeared. Now, what I kind of learned through the event was that Tony puts you into such a state. You're so hyped up on all these different things that he does to your brain that you're not hungry. And things like pain, even after you've been burned, just don't exist. And so even after the 4-day event was over, I still had no pain from these burns, despite them being pretty bad. And so at the end, the lesson is, look at the power of the mind. Look what can happen when you train your mind to overcome like crazy adversity. And so that became like a real metaphor of like, if I can do that and have no pain and be on a hungry stomach, like what else is possible? And so but again, he doesn't tell you any of this. I figured it out at the end. And so people see this stuff, and I've seen on Medium and a few other platforms, they make fun of the walking on fire and he's a scammer and he's this and that. It's like, he's only a scammer because you're naive and you don't have an open mind and you don't know what he's doing. And he doesn't really talk about anywhere how he runs his events or what happens or any of that, because it's sort of like his secret formula, right? That he doesn't want to share. It's only when you go into sort of neuro-linguistic programming and neuroplasticity and some of the things that he's doing, you start to go, now I know, like, for example, when you're in the event, he has these massive external air conditioners that he puts in the room, and they blow like the most freezing cold air you've ever had, right? And it's so cold, I'm like shivering in the event. That's how cold it is. And initially it's weird because you're like, why would he do that? And why would he bring in external air conditioners when the building has its own aircon? And then you figure out later that like extreme cold is part of what he needs. And then he has all these like disco lights and those like blinding lights that flash really fast. And again, you're like, why does he need that? And it's like, because as he goes through the different processes, he uses music and he uses lighting and the temperature to adjust your physiology for different things that he wants, because he knows that that'll implant it further into your mind as he does it. So it's a lesson in psychology, basically.
That's crazy, dude. I come across this a lot because frankly, I used to think, or at some point I thought Tony Robbins was just kind of cheesy, right? Which I'm sure he comes across as very cheesy. Still, don't really follow him. But when it comes to your work, I'm sure there are people in the comments, or you've had those comments, or you've had the people where they just don't believe it. Like they don't think that that can help them change their life. Do you have a process that you have for like talking to them and trying to open them up to it, or do you just let it be and hope that they come to it, or like wish them the best?
Yeah, unfortunately on Medium, there has been in the last year this category that's popped up, which I call demotivation, which basically says that all of this stuff is kind of a scam. Now, the
Yes.
reason people do it is it's clickbait. It's a great way to make a lot of money. But if you look at the people that do it, you'll see they've got no followers. They actually go backwards in followers. And they basically burn people out with just useless, pointless stuff. So yeah, I've dealt with a lot of trolls over the years. I generally just ignore them because you either get it or you don't. The way that I bring people on the journey is I attack it from different angles. So every article, I'll kind of leak it in, but in different ways. And eventually, I've figured out over the years like how to get it to a point where the average person does understand it and it does make sense without getting too deep into kind of psychology, which scares people. But some people just can't be helped. It's like they run around, they talk about politics all day, they watch the news, and then they build up this like skepticism muscle. And they go, making money online is a scam, affiliate marketing's a scam, networking's a scam. It's all a scam. We're all just we're selfish. We're going to burn the earth down. Capitalism's evil. It is what it is. Like I can't help those people. It's
Mm-hmm.
you basically sit in front of a TV and you are programmed to think that. So unless you want to get rid of the programming, doesn't matter what I say. The programming you're getting through the TV is stronger than me, and it's visual and it's got all the clickbait headlines and everything. It's designed to trigger you. I think I'm a little bit smart, but I'm not, unfortunately, smart enough to overcome that. So that's it.
Yeah.
But eventually, what I'll learn is these people come full circle. You're going to end up on this path. I just don't know when.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, you're going to lose something. Someone's going to die, mental illness. I don't know. There'll be something, and then you'll just figure it out. The same way that, like, you would understand this, that if you feel like really low on energy or you feel sick every day, you'll eventually figure out diet and exercise. I don't know when, I don't know how, I just know you're going to fall down that rabbit hole. So that's
Yeah.
it. Just it'll happen when it happens. I wish it would happen
Yeah.
tomorrow for you, but it's probably not going to. And that's up to you. And that comes back to
Yeah.
what you said around self-awareness. The other one that I have is personal responsibility. Like I mentioned
Yes.
before, a loss, right? And I've had a few of these losses recently. I don't go around and sook. I take accountability. It's my fault. I stuffed up and I'll fix it. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
No point blaming anyone. What can you do about it? Nothing. So
Right.
once you understand that, like, it's basically all your fault, and that sounds like really depressing, but it's actually really motivational because if it's all your fault, it means you have the power to change it. But if you want to blame the government or politics or whatever, I can guarantee you Joe Biden's not coming in to make you rich or save the day. No politician's going to help you. So I'm very anti-politicians, unfortunately.
No, I completely agree on the personal responsibility. Like to me, it's the only way to live. Like it seems kind of, to us, it's really the only way to live because we have gotten to the point and kind of deprogrammed or reprogrammed to a point where we understand. Like we've had the experiences that have taught us and ingrained that lesson into our head that yes, we are in direct control over the outcome of our life by focusing on the things that we can't control, and the things that we can't control, it's self-explanatory. Like trying to control them is just going to result in hurt. But I want to shift a bit back to the writing and ask what your favorite, not necessarily the most viral, but your favorite article that you've written. What is it?
It's a hard question. I've lost count of how many I've published now, but it's over 5,000 like long form
Oh,
articles.
jeez.
Yeah, because you got to. So I've just hit the 8-year anniversary of doing it since I started, and at the moment I'm publishing 10 long form articles a week, right? So that's, my maths is terrible. 40 a month. So that's a lot of articles.
That's insane.
And so what happens when you go through that process is It's kind of weird. Sometimes people will tweet at me like something that I wrote, say, 3 years ago, and I'll read it and I'll almost be embarrassed because I'm like, oh man, that's so cringy. Um, and that's just the evolution, because obviously your ideas and what you think changes over time, and that's why like trying to nail one particular article, it's really difficult.
Mm.
I'm trying to think like what's one that's helped people. I like the ones about mental illness because I do have this belief that a lot of people have probably got some form of mental illness and just don't realize it. And if they could understand that they had it, then and mental illness is essentially just like anxiety or depression is probably the two main types. So I wrote one about like 26 years of mental illness gone in a day, I think was one. And there was another one about mental illness and torture. If you Google that, those types of ones I think are quite powerful. I've written like a few romance ones over the years, like breakups and stuff. There's one I can think about. Oh, what's it called? It's got like a really clickbait title, and what it does that's kind of genius is I think it's about financial freedom. And so the first point is like invest your money, right? And it's like 2 sentences. And then the second point is like 1,500 words, and you read it and you think that it's going to be about like, you know, open a savings account or something. That's what I'm trying to trigger you on. And then it goes into like this in-depth story of like a breakup, and then going to the gym, and then like, and then it ends with like point 3. Well, I'm just going to make something up. Point 3, like buy the index fund. Point 4, consider gold. So it seems like it's a personal finance article, but then point 2 is this huge story that has nothing to do with personal finance. So that's, now that I think about it, I think that's probably my favorite of all time. But because I've written so many, I can't actually find it to tell you what it's called. I just remember the image. It's got a guy sitting in front of a computer with like a purple background, and I think it has financial something in it. But yeah, that was very popular. People were blown away because it sort of right hooked them, and they thought they were reading something that they weren't. And for me, they're the best articles. I did another one similar about Airbnb, where I wrote about the CEO of Airbnb, and it was all kind of one form. And then I went and like right hooked the CEO in the face and said, actually, there's something that he completely stuffed up. And so those ones where they take a right turn towards the end, they're my favorite. So yeah, probably one of those.
Nice. I love it. So anyone looking, try and find that and send it to Tim so he remembers the name.
Yeah, I'd love to read it again if I could find it.
Yeah, same. Yeah, send it to me too. I'll probably go looking for it. But the 5,000 articles blows me away. I've maybe written 30 threads total, but I've written like tens of thousands of tweets. And I'm sure you've written like even more emails on top of that. So do you have a framework or a process that you run through every time it's time to sit down and write? And like, what's your method for doing it so quick, aside from just experience and practice?
Yeah, this is quite a long answer. I wrote a pretty viral article about this. If people want to Google it, called like a transparent look behind the scenes at my writing schedule, something along those lines. If you put transparent and writing schedule in my name, you'll find it. I'm about to rewrite that article because that's actually out of date, and that was when I was working a 9-to-5 job. So I quit my job in May of this year. So up until then, I was doing 10 articles a week and working a pretty full-on job. And what's crazy now is that I look back, I don't actually even know how I did that for 7 years, work a crazy job and write 10 articles a week and do Twitter and do LinkedIn and all the other things. Even now, like that I don't work a job, I'm still crazy busy. But I think the depth is probably there. So back to your question, the schedule, if I try and map it out, it is very consistent. Now it's written on my calendar. So when I quit my job, I realized that if I don't have stuff in my calendar, like basically I'm never going to figure this out. So my process at the moment is Wednesdays and Saturdays are all day writing specifically for Medium. Start around 8 a.m. and I finish at 6 o'clock on both of those days. Then on Mondays, I edit everything that I've written for those 2 days. On Sundays, I add for the first like 2-3 hours of a Sunday, I add all the images to those 10 articles because I'm pretty obsessed with images and I like things to look nice. That's something that I care about. So a lot of people just put stupid images. I actually put a lot of thought into like what's the image that speaks to the headline, because when you see an article on Medium, you only see the headline and the picture. You don't see anything else. So if I stuff that up, I've lost you before I've even started, right? So I do the images on Sunday. Tuesday I do, now this is a new part of the process that I need to add. I made an online course. So for those of you who don't know, I have an online academy. And I have a business partner who's also my co-teacher, and we teach content creators. So we have 6 different courses, and one of the ones that we released this year was one about research. So I co-taught it, but I actually learned off my business partner that like research and writing is really important. And I was really crap. I was literally just doing like stream of consciousness, writing whatever was in my mind about that topic. And that worked for kind of like 6 years. But I figured out if I want to take the game to the next level, research is that game. So what I do on Tuesdays now, it's not just Tuesday, it's Tuesday, Thursday, Friday are research days. And that's when I do consumption. And also on Tuesday in the afternoon, I also write a Substack newsletter. And that's an article, because the way it works with Substack, if you copy and paste content from other platforms, Substack doesn't work. Substack is a VIP behind the scenes platform. And that's why 99% of people fail, because they just republish content and it's like, doesn't work. So when I explain Substack, I basically say it's like, Medium is the rock concert. You can go and see me for free. But if you want a backstage pass, you can only get that on Substack. Now, I don't charge for mine. 99% of people do, because I have a motto that like, as long as I can eat and I don't need the money, then I want to do it for free, because free scales much faster than paid. Most people know that, right? So Tuesday's the Substack day. So I'm doing a lot of consumption. What am I doing? I'm reading other Medium articles. Everyone that I follow on Twitter, I will check their timeline at least once per week. And I will save their best tweets. And I save them in Rome Research. So when we taught the course, I learned from my business partner how powerful something like Rome Research is. Because what it does is, in a traditional note-taking app, you have to make a lot of decisions. You have to decide, like, where does this note go? What folder does it go under? You have to put tags on it so you can find it again. And it wastes a lot of energy. And the sorting is very difficult. In Rome, there's no sorting. There's no hierarchy. You put everything in. It's like your second brain. And then using artificial intelligence, it starts to, like, connect the dots of your different ideas, which is quite clever. And it uses basically, like, hashtags that you assign to find those ideas again. So I use that as, like, a brain dump. So I dump in all those tweets. I dump in any articles I'm reading on Medium. I have about 20 different blogs that I read that I take different snippets out of and put into Rome Research. Rome has a cool function I haven't seen anywhere else, where there's like the main screen that has all your notes, and then you can open up a sidebar. And so what you can do is you can copy and paste from the sidebar into the main screen and back and forth. So the sidebar for me is all of the headlines, because every day I'm writing headlines for articles, which also become headlines of tweet threads or even tweets themselves. And then I'm basically like taking data from the main notepad and then pasting that underneath the headlines. Not always, but like I want to make sure that when I'm going into a writing day, I'm not starting with a blank page. And for about 5 years, that's what I did. And it's really, really difficult. I don't even know how I did it. I couldn't do it now. But I want to go into writing days with the headlines pre-written, and ideally a few dot points or tweets as inspiration to go under those headlines. So that's happening on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, all of that consumption and kind of synthesis of different ideas. Sometimes I'll even end up like writing part of the article into Rome. And then when I sit down on the writing days, that's when I basically copy and paste the headline into Medium. I'll copy and paste the dot points that I've pre-written, if there are any. Sometimes there aren't. And then I start writing the article. And that's much easier. Now, you said also, like, what are the other parts to the schedule? So I learned really early on, and something I'm obsessed with, and I'll probably write a book on it at some point, is flow states. So flow states for me are like the most powerful thing you can ever discover. And there's even a Disney movie now about flow states. I'm blanking on what the name is, but it's basically like an African-American guy who plays the piano, and he teaches about flow states. It's made by Disney Pixar. It came out in 2021. You'll find it with that information.
Yeah.
So really cool. And so how do I use flow states? It's a process I've refined over many years, but it starts with a few things. So if you want to have really great writing, you need to get your brain started. So for me, I go straight to the gym for about 45 minutes and do a workout before I ever write because that kickstarts the brain. I've had about a liter of water before I go to the gym, so I'm obviously nicely hydrated. And then I come home. I normally drink some coffee because I think coffee is a great way, again, to sort of kickstart things. Then I take my best ideas from my own research and I have a warm shower after the gym because I do believe that showers are one of the best ways to think about ideas. And some of the best articles I've ever written have come from the shower. In fact, it became such a magical place that I bought a wet marker, which you can buy from like any office supply store. And as I'm in the shower, I write on the wall of the shower like headlines, dot points, etc. And then I take them in and I write about them. It's the most magic that I can explain. And I actually did some research onto why it works. Apparently in showers, like you're very relaxed, similar to like if you've heard about walking. You know, you go for a walk, you take some ideas with you, and chances are you'll figure out the solutions. So that's where it comes from. And then basically once I'll sit down to write, I'll normally start by reading like just a few articles on Medium. And then one thing I've also figured out is that I'll often like to write a few tweets because, again, I think of like life as a gym, right? So for me, writing is just like workouts. And that's why I do 10 articles now. So I do 5 on one day, 5 on another. And the reason why I can do it is because I started with such a small amount of reps and such easy weight. And then I just, over the years, just built and built. So 10 articles sounds like a lot, but it's not when you've been training and doing the gym for that many years, right? So yeah, I'll write a few tweets because I think that's a really great warm up. It gets things, and I even like, actually my new favorite one is replying to tweets. Some of the best ideas I have is when I see a great tweet, I reply to it, and as I'm writing the reply, I'm like, shit, that's actually a better tweet. I'm not going to reply that at all. Or if it's really good, I'll go, actually, no, that's actually a Medium article. So that's kind of the warm up. Trying to think if I've left out anything in terms of process. You know, it's flow states, relax after I mean, that's a mammoth workout, right? 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. 2 days. Like by the end, I am completely stuffed. So normally I'll watch a movie or something because I've got no energy left. Yeah, man. I'm sorry, that was a long answer, but I want to give you like all the steps.
No, that's a beautiful answer, dude. I really like that. And I've experienced the same thing. I haven't made that connection of, like, I've heard it before, right? Where it's all like writing is all prep work, or copywriting specifically. It's all market research, and then the writing writes itself. And my question for you from that is, that new course or any course that you have, do you have like your own research structure in there? Like, is there somewhere where I can just steal your process for putting that in? Because I recently canceled Rome Research after I stopped using it for like a year. And now you're reminding me of how good it was, especially with the new stuff that I'm doing. And I want to get back into it and like actually organize my Notion in there and start tagging stuff. So do you have like a training on that?
Yeah, so I'll send you a link to it. You're a mate, so you get it for free. Normally people have to pay for it, but yeah. So I often try and explain, and this kind of answers one of your early questions too. I was a bit stupid in this whole process because I was trying to do everything by myself, and the superpower was about a year ago I got a business partner because I was trying to keep 100% of everything that I make, and I've got this motto of like 100% of nothing is nothing. Now, what a lot of people don't know with online courses is I tried over the last 8 years to launch an online academy 3 times. Now, even with a mailing list of 50,000 plus people, I made no sales. I think 2 of them I made 0, and I think 1 of them I might have made 2 sales, and I think 1 of them ended up getting a refund. So it showed me that it doesn't matter how big your mailing list is, there is a bit of magic involved with the online course thing. So once I got a business partner, I took my skills of like writing and audience building, combined it with his skills of copywriting. He's a bit of a romantic writer. So he's got a couple of Amazon bestsellers, and he's very much from that traditional world, not really the online writing world. And then we combine those skills, and like we've built just this massive course empire kind of out of nowhere. And again, I'm a little bit of a junkie with this stuff where we've launched 6 courses. That's a lot to launch in 1 year. And in fact, next year I
Yeah.
plan on launching a new course every single month that's brand new. Because
Nice.
I don't know, I just like doing things at like a high pace.
Projects, man. It's the flow
Yeah,
state.
yeah, and so yeah. So to answer your question, like yeah, there is. We don't call it a Rome research course because we figured out that people don't buy platforms or
Mm,
things like that. They buy pain points. So the pain
right.
point we figured out, which you'll probably appreciate, is that writers want to write faster. That's actually what they're trying to do, and that's what
Yes.
I was trying to do. So we actually created this course because I had a problem that I wanted to write faster, and I felt that the quality of my writing wasn't as good as it could be. And so, because my business partner had all those skills, I said, well, you're going to teach me in this course, and then I'll add in anything that I think is valuable as we do it. So, I watched his process in Rome Research, and I went, oh my God. So, we called the course, I forgot the name, it's like 10x writing or something, 10x your writing speed. And no
Mm,
joke, since people have done it, they're like, oh my God, this actually does work. Like, you'll write so fast once you understand the process. Now, since he's taught that to me, I've adapted a little bit because there are parts that I think for me are a bit too long-winded, and that's fine. Like you don't need to copy it exact, but it'll give you enough of a blueprint that then you can sort of expand on it. So like one thing he does, I'll give you an example. He'll consume a podcast or a book, and then he'll create a brand new page in Rome, and he'll write down 3 different versions of notes. So one is like direct quotes, one is like quotes that he's written in his own words, and then one is quotes that he's then like dumbed down to a few words. I think they're called fleeting notes. And then those fleeting notes become ideas for articles. And I like that. The problem is I consume so much content at such a fast rate that to like spend 30 minutes per piece of content going through this long process doesn't quite work for me. So I've adapted his process over the time, but that's to give you a bit of an idea of like how he thinks about it. And so when notes are rewritten in your own words, then when you come to write an article or write a tweet, half the work is done for you because it's already in your own words. And then when you distill it down to those like even smaller ideas, it is a powerful process. I just don't have half an hour per piece of content to do it. That's all.
mm. This is gonna help me so much. Like now that, dude, I mean, actually, it was like 3 years ago that I stopped using it. I canceled Rome recently after I got charged, and so I'm gonna have to buy it again and hope I can get some of those notes back because I want to dig through those from 3 years ago. But I wasn't doing nearly as much as I am now because I could only imagine how much that helps because right now I'm maybe 120 pages into a book I'm writing and everything's connected in there, right? And thinking back to Rome research, it's like, well, that's exactly what it does. It connects everything. So I'm having to like read through certain parts of the book, wasting like an hour just filling my head with like, okay, yeah, what was it that I said here that can be tied back in here? So I'm like making sure it all flows together. So it'll be super helpful. I'm gonna go through that tonight. If you send me the link, I'll buy it either way.
No, no, no,
And
that's fine. That's fine.
okay,
I'll
well,
just
we'll
give you a
we'll
warning. I
see.
think the first lesson's got a little bit of clicky sound on it. I don't know why. We had a slight issue with the mic, but that's mainly
That's fine.
when we're doing introductions. But surprisingly as well, so we did a bit of an experiment on that course. We did it at a lot cheaper than every other course just to see what it would do. And it's been our most popular course, which I would never have
Nice.
predicted because I have a medium course. I would think that that's what most people want. I've got like a
Yeah.
Substack course. Again, Substack's a hot platform. I thought people would want it. But nah, learning how to write faster turns out to be a massive pain point for people. And it's not a simple answer. It's not like, oh, just sit down and like, consume a few tweets. It's not that simple. There's actually a process to how you do it. And I do think you need a tool because I was using Apple Notes before, but the notes were everywhere. Like when you're writing a book, you try and find stuff about, say, self improvement or the gym or whatever it is, and you can't. And then Rome, like I said, it connects things. So it makes connections between different ideas that I wouldn't have put together myself. And it's just so powerful when you do it. The only thing you have to do if to really maximize it is if you add the hashtags in as you're doing the notes, I find it's easier to recall stuff later. So I go a bit crazy. Like if I put in, like I have some of your tweets saved in my Rome, right? So I'll put like hashtag self improvement, hashtag your name, and then I'll put a little bit more detail like hashtag negativity, hashtag failure, hashtag rejection. And then what you can do is you can add multiple filters. So if I'm writing a self-improvement book, which for me is a broad topic, and then I'm writing a chapter about rejection, I can search my Roam for just self-improvement and rejection and just get those ideas. And by the end, man, it's like the book writes itself. And like we even, because my business partner is a book writer, we've done an Amazon publishing course. And I learned in that, like, I'm like, how do you write a book? And he's like, dude, you're an idiot. He goes, all you do is like basically the book title is just the headline. So you spend a lot of time coming up with a great book title, right? And then all he does is he just goes to Medium. He just grabs his best articles. They become the chapters. And then the points within those articles become like the sub-points of the chapter. And that's it. Like it's that simple. And then he just writes the book, but half of it's already written for him. And then you start to like tap into Amazon. And so he like has an Amazon ad agency, right? So he does Amazon ads for writers. And I naturally was like, man, Amazon ads don't work. You know, like it's old platform. And he's like, nah, dude. And he showed me like, even with no history on Amazon, you can get a like really positive ROI on a tiny investment. And you could have no followers, no nothing, and get a bestseller on Amazon just using ads. So we added that into the course because I was like super excited to go, wow, okay, I didn't know that ads can sell books with no audience. That's freaking cool. So that's part of the fun. When you make these courses, you go into the research phase and you're not making it for you, you're making it for other people. You know, we're charging serious money. These courses are not like $10. Like they cost a bit of money. So it sort of forces you to deliver. And then by the end, as the teacher, I end up like 10 times smarter because like I've had to go and teach this stuff. And there's a lot of quotes around like, if you learn it and then have to teach it, you know, that it's really powerful. So when we did the Substack course recently, I had to like go through all my notes of everything I've ever learned about Substack, which is all in Roam. And I figured out like all these things that I hadn't figured out before, even though I use the platform every day. And so, you know, it's back to the old thing of like you start joining ideas together and then you build on that. So it's like you become stronger and more powerful as you're helping other people do the same thing. So it's for anyone that doesn't have an online academy and writes content, I would strongly recommend it. It's really cool.
Nice. The teacher learns more than the student.
Yeah.
All about that. I completely agree. And dude, I'm going to be in your DMs a lot because the one Amazon publishing thing, I'm going to buy these like either way. It doesn't matter because I haven't even looked at your courses and now I want to buy all of them because I'm going to have to publish this on Amazon, but I want to publish it elsewhere. Like I want to have it in stores somehow. That's just always been a goal of mine, but Amazon is clearly like it has to go on Amazon. So definitely going to be in your DMs about that. But
the bad news with courses, and I mentioned this in the DM originally, was and I think this is interesting for anyone that's interested in online courses. You can't actually Google any of the courses that we sell. They're not available anywhere. And it's kind of deliberate because it acts as a bit of a filter. We don't just want random people like Googling courses and coming in because they end up wanting refunds or like they don't end up completing it and it's just pointless. It wastes everyone's time. So we don't actually have any on-ramps to get into our courses. There's a bunch of software that I use to like manage the whole business and that has filters. And as people pass through the filters, they may or may not end up in a path where they can see these courses, but we don't have any website. And in fact, I mentioned in the DMs as well that we don't really use automation either. So we have this like whole counterintuitive business because it's back to the writing thing. Too many people are treating humans like robots and they're putting them through email funnels and they're like automating all these tweets and doing all this stuff. And in the end, it's like the relationship is so shallow and useless that I don't think you really make any money doing that. I mean, you can, but so I'm very anti that model. So I think just for anyone building online courses, that's another way to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to have to start a Substack or something because I have my newsletter, but it's on Kartra right now, which has automations for like buyer's journey. Like when they buy something, it like helps walk them through the course or reminds them of certain aspects of it to get them to use it better, which I feel like is kind of necessary there. But one thing I want to talk about before we go, and I feel like you'll maybe want to talk about this a lot. So we'll see. We'll see where this goes. But you're big into Web3 from what I saw.
Hmm.
Do you see a way of online writing or just like the creator economy working into that, aside from, like, right now, the only thing that I see, and I know barely anything about NFTs. I know like crypto, Ethereum, some coins, I'm invested into it. But with like writing or courses or communities or even like tweets, do you see some opportunity there,
Yeah,
either
I'm
in
actually
terms
writing
of
something on this at the
NFTs?
moment.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all interconnected. So I'm writing something on this at the moment, and the underlying philosophy is a few things. So like I got into Web3 in 2013. So I was working in a bank, and a customer came to me and said, "We want to set up a Bitcoin exchange." And I was still working in the call center at that point, and so the idea was volume. So I wanted to get rid of this guy really quick. And I was like, "Mate, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, there's no way we're going to help you do that. Like, just go away." Um, and about 3 months later, one of my mentors, who was a bit more senior than me, he came back and he ended up doing that deal because I obviously declined it, and then he ended up doing it. He said, "Look, you're very naive. You need to actually come out on the road and like watch how this stuff works." So he forced me to learn about Bitcoin. And at that time, there were like cafes where you could go and you could buy a hamburger and pay with Bitcoin. And if you pay with Bitcoin, they give you like a discount. So like we bought a bunch of Bitcoin or whatever so we could buy some hamburgers, and I kind of learned the process. And then over the years, like I just became an investor. I started learning about inflation, central banks, because I was working in finance. I had to, right? And I was also interested in it. And so I could see there was a need for like a digital currency that was borderless, something like Bitcoin. And so I just kept like dollar cost averaging into it over the years. Became really interested. Then Ethereum launched. I became really interested in Ethereum. And very complicated to understand, but I was pretty early into that as well. And then over the years, it's sort of pivoted now with NFTs and the creator economy, and it's solving a problem which a lot of people don't understand. Like social media is broken in its current form. So we go on there, we publish our content, we get paid $0 for doing so. The platform sells ads. They keep all that money for themselves. They can ban us whenever they want. They don't tell us why or how or whatever. They can ban the president of the United States. They can do whatever they want. You don't get access to your audience. So a follower to me is the most useless thing in the world because they can unfollow me. And even if they do follow me, they don't necessarily see everything that I publish because there's so many tweets, for example, that are published every day. So it's kind of pointless. We don't have any relationship. I can't like sell them a course or advertise my new book or anything. So it's useless. And so what Web3 discovered was that this is broken. Between censorship and moderation and ownership of the reader's data, the current model has what they call 100% take rate. They take everything, you get nothing. Now you can try and put them into an email list, and there are ways to do that, but anyone that's done that like I have will tell you that it's like 1% of people will end up in your email list. That's still fine, but it's not really sustainable. And then Substack came along, and Substack had a different model, and they said, whatever you do on Substack, you own the audience. The only problem with that is like initially they don't give you an audience. You can bring your audience there and keep owning it, but you can't actually build an audience on there. Now that's actually changing and you will be able to, but in the initial days you couldn't. So for people like me, like I started really early on LinkedIn, and over the years I've been banned from LinkedIn 4 times. Now that may not sound like a big deal, but LinkedIn is my resume. So if you ban me from LinkedIn, you've basically deleted my resume. As a salesperson, because that's what I did in my 9 to 5 job, I can't ring any of my customers or keep in contact with them because they're all in my LinkedIn. So it's basically like you shut down my life by banning my LinkedIn account. Now, I didn't do anything wrong. It ended up being just like some bad automation. It was accidental banning. So I got my account back each time, but I realized like, hey, what happens if at some point I don't get it back? What's going to happen then? Well, what? I'm going to take Microsoft to court. Best of luck like beating them. It's not going to happen. So I started to see the problems with like Web 2, which is the current version that we're using. And I was already an investor in Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I saw what it did to like finance and money. And then I saw decentralized finance starting to come out. And then I saw like the early days of NFTs, and I started to see, hey, maybe this could actually solve some of the social media problems. Because the problem with social media is like it's owned by a few people that make all the decisions, right? And the difference with Web3 is that the users of these apps also own the apps. So a Web3 platform that I use is BitClout. It's been renamed recently to DESO, DESO. And so on BitClout, like people can invest in my cryptocurrency, and every time I sell a book or a course, they can receive a dividend in cryptocurrency from everything that I sell. So they're like an investor in the Tim Denning stock is probably the simplest way to explain it. I can also publish content on there. The users on the platform decide whether you get banned. So it's like a court of law. It's not just like you don't just get taken out. There's rules, and if you break the rules, then users get together and using a democratic vote, we vote whether that person should be taken off the platform. All the content is, what's the word I'm looking for? It is portable. So a lot of people don't understand what NFTs really do. So NFTs take content, they place it on the blockchain, and then they assign ownership to that content. So I could take one of your tweets, put it on the blockchain, put your name Dan Coe against it. You can put your signature on it using your digital wallet, so we know it's Dan. It's not someone pretending to be Dan. And that goes on the blockchain. And then once it's on the blockchain, then on the next layer above that, you can then publish it on Facebook, Twitter, Substack, wherever you want to. Now, if each of those platforms has their own moderation policy, at any point you can decide that you don't agree with that moderation policy, remove your NFT from that social media platform, and then move it to another social media platform. So that's the world that we're heading to, where you own the content and you can, whereas right now you can't like go on Facebook, copy all your content and like paste it to another Facebook. There is no option, and that's deliberate. They own your content forever, and even if you delete it, they still own it, right? So that's the kind of revolution. And what it does from a monetization point of view is that if I know that that's your content and you put it on the blockchain, you can buy my cryptocurrency, you can become an investor. So therefore, why would you not want to buy my tweet or my book cover or whatever it is? So you can buy it. Now, let's say you and I got together and we built something together. Well, right now on Twitter, you can't like divide a piece of content amongst multiple people and share that money. There is no option to do that. On BitClout, for example, you and I can co-publish something and we can split the revenue between us, and then we can also split it out to our favorite charity in real time without pushing any buttons. So then you get that layer. There was one other point I was going to make that was really important. The portability, the splitting. Yeah, it's just lost my mind. There's another platform that's come up called mirror.xyz. I don't think they're the one in terms of written content, but I am keeping a very close eye on what they're doing. I know what I was going to say. So BitClout's done something interesting. This is going to blow your mind. I just figured it out recently. When I publish a tweet, because I copy and paste all my tweets onto BitClout, when I go to publish it now, as of a week ago, I actually have to pay in cryptocurrency every time I publish. And I went and asked someone who's a bit of an expert. So I have to pay. So like on BitClout, people invest in my coin, and that coin is denominated in the BitClout cryptocurrency. Now I can then convert that currency into US dollars whenever I like, but I don't personally. So that sits there in my BitClout digital wallet. And a couple of things happen. If you follow my content, you can either like it, which earns me no money, or you can diamond like it, which earns me, and you can diamond like it as many times as you want. And every time you do it, it's like 5 cents or something that it gives me for doing that. So the model is very simple. I publish a piece of content, people diamond like my content, that takes money out of their wallet, puts it in my wallet. I then spend that money to then publish tweets. So what it does is it gets rid of low quality crap content. Because if I have to pay money to publish, then I'm not going to publish crap. And then if that content is good and the users say that it's good, they then give their money to then essentially not only cover the cost of what it was for me to publish it, but also so I can make a profit on that tweet. So this is like a whole new world of like content. I mean, this is early days. It's not perfect. There's a lot of bugs with it. But imagine in 5 years, like, I mean, for me, I think it's game changing. So that's kind of a
Yeah.
summary of what's going on for writers at the moment.
Damn. So I'm assuming that you would recommend people get on BitClout, or is it called DeSo now?
I think you can find it both ways. I would get on it to experiment with it. There's a lot of things I don't like about it. So in terms of turning, yourself into a stock that people can invest in, I think that feature's pretty cool. So my coin at last check was at $1,100 per coin, which is a nice way to monetize because I think it started at like $50, right? So that's
Yeah.
cool. Um, the using it at the Twitter function, and I don't quite know, but like it has essentially the same function as Twitter with a timeline. I think that's just a nice to have. It's not a serious feature. Like I publish a lot on there, and you can't really build any followers. It's almost
Mm.
impossible. So I don't think that that feature will be there long term. I think that's more of an experiment. Um, what they want to be is they want to be the base layer of social media. So you put all of your content, your profile, your photo, your digital wallet on BitClout, and then eventually the new versions of Twitter, YouTube, etc. build on top. I think
Mm.
that's their overall goal. I don't know if they'll succeed in this because obviously it's early, and I know from the .com bubble that a lot of these probably won't make it. And I was also around in 2017 when the crypto market crashed and a lot of things went to zero. And I can tell you from back then, there was so much hype about different cryptos, and like 99% of them went to zero. Like there was one I invested in called Monero that was huge back then, and like
Oh, yeah.
no one cares about that anymore. Um, so I think it's just one of those things of like keep an open mind. It is blatantly obvious that the current model of social media doesn't work. We saw a couple of weeks ago that a few big name US politicians. There's some really cool Twitter accounts that follow the stock investments of politicians, so that if you
Mm.
want, you can basically invest in the same things that they are, because obviously they have knowledge that you and I don't. And those accounts were banned. And there's also a big name trial going on in America at the moment, which I won't name because we don't want to get into politics, but something that hasn't been appeared in the mainstream news that should. And there was a Twitter account that was just doing some reporting on that court case, and that account also got banned. So what we're
Mm.
seeing is just every day more and more censorship. Even on YouTube, I'm seeing like Bitcoin content get censored. Anyone that mentions anything about the global health crisis, that gets censored. So we're getting to a point where it's like, why do a bunch of guys wearing t-shirts with backpacks get to sit in a room and basically tell us what we can and can't like publish? It's bullshit. Like we should
It
be able to
is.
say whatever we want. And so, blockchain and cryptocurrency will fix this. The thing is, we're all so early, I just don't know. So, what
Yeah.
would I say? Obviously, understand what Bitcoin is, definitely understand what Ethereum is, research
Mhm.
decentralized social media, invest a small amount of money in some of these things because I think you'll get exponential return. Like cryptocurrency for me has been a game changer. I've made a lot of money at it over the years, but that's because I kept an open mind.
Mhm.
Stay away from the scams, stay away from the things that have been around 2 weeks. I like Bitcoin and Ethereum because they've got time in the game. Bitcoin is 13 years old. Ethereum's just had its 6 year birthday. These are the two biggest cryptocurrencies in the world. Pretty safe bet. Once you start going down into the smaller stuff, you're basically just gambling, and so I try and stay away from that. So, sorry, Dan, I know I
That
went
makes
a bit
sense.
overboard, but that's yeah.
No, it's super interesting to me. I always say like I've been meaning to get into it, but it's just like I this is something where like if I wanted to prioritize it and get into it, I know a decent amount about it. I'm making myself sound like an idiot by not like I know a good amount about it. Don't know anything about the decentralized social media though. So that's something that would directly impact me. So I should definitely at least keep an eye on it, right? Not
So
fully
let me give you
focus
some
on it.
motivation, Dan. Let me give you some
Okay.
motivation.
Okay.
So you've got no choice but to understand it because you're in America, yeah?
Yes.
Cool. So right now, you may or may not be aware that inflation in your country at the moment is six point eight
Oh,
percent, going
yes.
on 7%. Now, when people hear that number and that phrase inflation, people hear it and go, it's innocent. Don't worry about it. Let me tell you what it really is for the people that don't understand. It's essentially the currency that you have in your bank account is being devalued on purpose as a second form of tax. Now, why are they doing it? They're not evil. It's not a conspiracy. They're doing it to pay for a certain global health crisis. because they got to get the money from somewhere, right? And so what they do is they create that money, and that leads to the inflation. So at the moment, every year your money is worth 7% less than it was the year before. So that's pretty terrible. So if you don't understand this world, now Dan would say, but Tim, and I see this on money Twitter all the time. Yeah, but I could go put my money into the S&P 500 index fund, and I can make, let's say, conservatively 7%, 8%. And if you look historically, yeah, that's pretty fair. You can do that. So let's just understand what that means, though. You put your money into those stocks. They say they grow to, say, 7% in a year. So you're back to zero on your money, right? You're back to zero. Now you say, well, what else can you buy? You're going to go buy gold? Well, that's down 10% over the last, or was it 5%? 10% over the last 10 years. So you're probably not going to buy gold because it hasn't performed. Are you going to go and put cash in the bank? Well, no, interest rate is zero. So you'd be at negative 7% per year if you put it there, right? Mm-hmm. So where else do you invest? Obviously, you're not going to put 100% of your money into cryptocurrency. But if you don't understand what cryptocurrency is and you stay in the current system, well, then all the good stuff you're doing on Twitter, all the online courses that you're building, you're going backwards. And you're going backwards by a lot. At the same time, stocks are at record highs. Real estate's getting more expensive. So everything's going up. And then if you don't understand cryptocurrencies, you're going backwards. Give that 5 years, you're going to be not doing too well, right? And so this is where the cryptocurrencies have come in. They've tried to sort of solve this problem. And I don't think they've 100% solved it. But I was trying to explain this to someone the other day that people get lost in labels. And I hate labels because I think they sort of silo things. Cryptocurrency is a label. And all it essentially is in 2021 is tech stocks. If you buy a cryptocurrency, all you're doing is you're just buying a tech stock. So if you buy Ethereum, you're buying what used to be Amazon 20 years ago. If you buy Bitcoin, you're buying Bank of America from 20 years ago. That's all you're doing. It's just a label. So if you're not buying the equivalent of tech stocks, and we know that all the businesses are all basically becoming tech companies, then you can sit in cash, you can sit in gold, you can buy bonds that are negative yielding. What else are you going to buy? So from a money point of view, you have to understand this, or you go backwards and you become poorer. So the choice is yours, but there is no option here. The social media stuff is a nice to have, but the money stuff is survival. It's
right.
You're dead in the water if you don't understand it.
That makes sense. Well, listeners, I hope you're invested. We have in our private community, we have a crypto channel. And there's a few guys in there that help answer my naive questions. So it's cool to be able to. That's the cool thing about this side of social media, though, is you kind of have access to. Well, I mean, we've had access to all information we want, but you have specific knowledge from people who are actually doing these things. And so, especially on things like Twitter, where it's just rapid fire information, you have to separate the signal from the noise, but at the same time it's so cool to be able to be in this space, just everyone as a whole, and people listening to this podcast, they're immersed in they're being bullied into buying crypto and starting a business and developing their skills and all this stuff. I think it's a great echo chamber to be in. But Tim, that was a fucking amazing podcast, man. I really enjoyed having you on. As a last words, where can people find you? Where can they sign up for your email list? And how can they get access to those courses of yours?
Yeah, so obviously I don't advocate to follow on social media because we can't stay in touch. So if people want to sort of connect with me, you can directly through timdenning.com. So my last name is DENN for Nelly, ING.com/TB is the mailing list. If you jump on there, you get a free copy of my new book, which I just launched a few weeks ago. That's how you get on the email list. So I send out an email every Friday. And then there's also options if you want to join the Substack via that channel as well, you can. And similar to yourself, Dan, we're talking about self-improvement, personal finance, how to write online, these types of topics. So that's where you can find me.
Sweet. Well, thanks again, man, for coming on. We'll be in touch probably right after this. I'm going to go and buy Rome again and start plugging stuff into there. So I appreciate you, man. Listeners, thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next one. Later.
Thank you so much for listening to that episode of the Modern Mastery podcast. I have a few favors to ask you. For a whopping $0, you can support this podcast by following, rating, and subscribing on whichever platform you are listening on. For an additional $0, you can share this podcast and tag us at Modern Mastery on Twitter or at Modern Mastery HQ on Instagram. This helps the Modern Mastery community grow and allows me to bring you top-tier guests to fuel your hunger for wisdom. It costs $0, but it does cost you your time, and we understand how valuable that can be. Lastly, if you are trying to build a one-person business as a content creator, coach, freelancer, digital product creator, or online educator, consider joining Modern Mastery HQ that has hundreds of proven processes, strategies, and systems that you can copy and paste into your life and business to become a highly paid, free, and fulfilled individual. Go to join.modernmastery.co/podcast to get your first month for $5 and gain instant access to 4 beginner legacy courses, hundreds of trainings and strategies, and a community of growth-minded individuals, because quite frankly, your friends and family just don't understand this kind of stuff. With that, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Modern Mastery podcast, and I'll see you in the next one.